It is interesting to wind the clock back about a decade. You came up obviously in 2012 on a very veteran team. You remained on a very veteran team in 2013 that was transitioning to being a younger team in 2014. You like that was not necessarily an easy path. That was not necessarily an easy culture into which to integrate, right? Like, what I have. I heard plenty of stuff about how difficult the adjustment was, especially for Mookie in 2014, and how hard that veteran group was on him at times for doing things that he thought, like when he would show up really early for work. He would show up to go to work at like 1 o'clock, and then he would be taking a nap in the clubhouse on the couch when the veterans were showing up to get their work in at 3. And so they thought that was a sign of like great disrespect and crush him, right? Like how much has that landscape changed in terms of how hard veterans are on rookies as they kind of try to figure out their own footing.
Yeah, I think that last, 2012 to like 2015, 16, that last group of really old school grizzled vets, the Josh Beckett's and Lackeys and Lesters, Johnny Gomes, and all these guys who came up with a group that were really hard on them. And then they thought, hey, this is the right way I have to treat the young guys. It doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. Not for most guys. It didn't work for me. It made me really uncomfortable, and it
Yeah.
made things tough. I mean, just to be honest, like I wasn't comfortable going to the ballpark, and they didn't want me to be. You have to earn that, right? You have to earn that right to be comfortable. Whether that's putting numbers on the back of your baseball card or just putting the time in and getting service time. It was a dumb unwritten rule. That's it. It's just the way it had always been, and there was no conversation of mental health or wanting or an understanding of young players when they're comfortable, they play better and they get more out of themselves. They didn't. That wasn't a thing because it had just never been a thing. So I think once you got, I don't know, 2018, 2019, 2020, around there, I feel like things started to shift. I think that group of players started making their way out of the league. And then there was just a different group of players with I don't know, a better perspective on how to treat people, right? And how to get, and it starts from the top. It's got to start from a manager. It's got to start from coaches. Veteran leadership has got to understand the human aspect of things. And I think we're finally to that point in baseball where it starts with people being vocal about mental health and understanding when you make someone feel wanted and you're my teammate, you're my buddy, you're my boy, you're going to get more out of that guy. And it's human nature. It's just how it works. And it's starting to bleed into baseball and become normal.
Well, it's interesting because obviously the Red Sox are heavily dependent. Like this is kind of a first half in review. Their success has been heavily dependent upon all of these young players taking that step forward, right? Like it's remarkable. I went through the exercise last week of looking at the preseason player by player projections, offensively at least, and what the reality has been. And basically, what you're seeing is that everyone is outperforming their projections, save for Cedar Rafaela, who's been on the upswing and who's outperforming those projections in the most recent weeks, as well as Emmanuel Valdez, who, again, since being recalled from Worcester, has well outperformed what his projections were. You had that experience in 2012 of having kind of come on like gangbusters, right, and having outperformed projections. How when you see a team's success built upon that, should that feel like there's a solid floor in terms of what the formula for Red Sox success has been, or should there be a little bit of like a little bit of concern that like, oh, there is that young players, the ability of young players to sustain that higher level comes with without a firm floor.
I think a lot of these players, what we're seeing right now is who they are. And I think that a lot of that is because of who they're surrounded with. I felt like I was the only guy who hadn't been arbitration yet. I was constantly in survival mode. Um, a lot of these guys played through the minor leagues together. They rode the buses together. They are family, right? And they're comfortable here. So they're having sustained success at the big league level together. And I feel like when you do that as a group, that's how you start to build kind of, obviously not in on the same level as Baltimore. They went through a full tear down rebuild all these first picks, went through the minor leagues together. They won all the way through the minors together. That's on a whole different level. That's the Red Sox don't rebuild. They can't rebuild. They can retool, but they still got to be competitive. A rebuild in Boston is hope you 500 and you're competitive in August and September. That's a rebuild in Boston. Let's be honest. So they haven't had the ability to just tear down and have all these first round picks for 5 years and build around them. They've had to take guys and use their scouting department and develop these guys into what they hope they can get the same production out of the first rounders that are running through the Baltimores and these teams that went through rebuilds. And I think at this point, I'm kind of pivoting a little bit, but I think at this point, over the last couple of years, we've been looking at these young guys, waiting for them to bloom and blossom into what we're seeing right now, so that ownership and front office can add to it. And they haven't been to a point where it hasn't made sense to add a ton of talent around what they've had, because they didn't really know what they had. So at this point, after Jarren Duran, he showed last year, okay, he can be a really good player. Is that real? Well, yeah, he's doing it again at an even higher level. He's turning into, and we talked about Alex Cora, how he has talked about Jarren Duran being a leader. He's a tone setter. He is becoming a leader in that clubhouse just by the way he puts on his cleats and goes and plays the game. But now it's developing this core of players. You're going to get Tristan Casas back, who's a part of the future. Brian Bayo, who is not. His stuff is we can get into this later, but his stuff is so good. And it's just, he's like one tiny mechanical fix away from being an ace, is what I feel like. Because the stuff is ace stuff, but in the middle of the plate, he just hadn't been able to command his stuff. So it's like, but he's a part of this. So the point is this group is ready. So at some point, the higher ups, the gods of the Red Sox, have to say it's time to add. This is where you sprinkle in and you go, in my opinion.
But all right, so let's look at that.